I grew up in a Christian home, attended church every single Sunday, every single Wednesday. But the message never really latched on and sunk in that, hey, this is the most important thing. So eventually I found something that I was pretty good at, which was tennis. That's something that I can really find self-esteem from. So that then became my pursuit. All day, every day, I would focus my activities around that, from my diet to my exercise to everything. Like, that was what it was all about. When I got to college, tennis continued to be my number one. Started to, I think, surround myself with a group that maybe influenced me a little bit more negatively. So then I really started to go down kind of a more beaten path, or a more rough road. And it ended up leading to major heartbreak. Moved down here and things pretty much just imploded and fell apart like the week we got down here, basically. And a few months later, I drove past a church and it said, "Not currently attending church, harvest was formed for you." And I was like, yeah, I attended church all the way growing up until I moved out and went to college. And I really haven't attended since at all. So I was like, man, maybe, I should check this out. The topic of the sermon was Thanksgiving. I remember specifically someone in college asking, hey, what's the purpose of life? Another person said, well, the purpose of life is to be happy. Pursue happiness. That's the purpose of life. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I didn't have a ton of wisdom that I could draw on to give truth or counter that or anything. So I just went with it and I was like, yeah. So anyway, Ralph gives this sermon about, hey, basically here's the secret to contentment. I'd never had an encounter with the Holy Spirit like that. That was where I really believe the Holy Spirit encountered me. Became pretty good friends with Joel, who's the youth pastor here, and he told me to read the book of John. It's 21 chapters. I'm like, all right, 3 weeks. I just read one chapter a night and see what happens. First two chapters the first chapter's what is this? It's, the first half of it really, so I didn't get too much out of it the first two nights. And then John 3:16 and 17 strike, and I had another encounter with the Holy Spirit right there. So that was my first time actually encountering the Holy Spirit through the Word. From there, I was kind of like, hey, what's next? So I went through phase 1 discipleship, just started to learn so much truth in terms of how important the Word is, how important prayer is, how important surrender is. Ended up meeting my now wife, Katie, a couple of years later, moved up to Minnesota. When we moved up to Minnesota, it took us I didn't find a harvest immediately. We spent some time looking, but not really looking that hard. And anyway, 6 months later, I had it was a mental breakdown that was work-induced. So I think really what happened was my work, my career, my drive to just be successful, economically, and be successful in the eyes of the world, that kind of replaced tennis. That was when we were okay, me and Katie were both okay, we have to find a church right now. And so luckily we found a good church up there. We ended up having Samuel, our firstborn, in February 2020, right before COVID hit. That was a big part of what helped me make the decision to come back to Dothan. So last summer we moved back, seeing him go to the kids area and how much, how loved he is there and how much fun he has there is gonna just help set such a good foundation for him to have a really strong relationship with the Lord. And I'm really excited to have him go through that. The level of teaching on Sundays is so high. There's so many opportunities for volunteering and serving and just small groups on Wednesday nights. I think everyone should go Wednesdays and Sundays. It's a great way to do it. From discipleship to freedom, some of these different elements that Harvest has as well. It's really an amazing place to be. It's really an amazing church for someone and their family to be able to pursue their walk with the Lord. What good is it to gain the whole world if you end up losing your soul? And so pursuing anything but the Lord as number one just doesn't work out, whatever it is. For me, it was success, worldly success, whether that manifested itself in the form of a sport or whether that manifested itself in professional success. Ultimately, it's just about seeking God and His kingdom. And that's the only thing that really matters.